Yeah, welcome. And so what I'm kicking off today is a series of Blender projects that I'm calling like 3D doodles. I know doodles might seem like a wrong word for it, but what I mean by doodle is a 1 to 2 hour project from scratch to a finished result. Whether it's, well, I'm going to be doing still images, but like if someone could do an animation or a quick character rig and a simple animation, that would be pretty amazing to do in 2 hours. But that's kind of what Doodle represents to me, and I've scheduled a few for the coming weeks, including today, where we're going to start from absolutely nothing and create a finished render and do all the process in between, so you get to see everything raw, including full render time. So I hope you're excited about that one. But I'll try and keep you entertained during those. I'm expecting like maybe 3 to 5 minute renders until the final render, which I don't know. It might get up as high as 10 minutes, just depending on how big I make the resolution. But anyway, it should be fun. I think this kind of format will be good for the stream, and hopefully you learn some things along the way. Now, just to show you exactly what we're going for, let me switch over to my browser, and we're at creating icicles. And so yeah, I started by posting, when I scheduled the stream, we just had a couple images that were inspiring me. And now this is what we're going to create, essentially a nice tall format kind of portrait of icicles zoomed way in, kind of a macro shot of the icicles. So what we're going to be exploring in this stream is, okay, yeah, sorry, making sure the stream was looking good. We're going to be looking at very simple modeling. We're just going to be, creating a very basic model of an icicle, duplicating that around, creating a nice shader to create all the refraction stuff happening inside of the icicle. So the bulk of the work is going to be done in the node editor, and then we'll do a final render, do a little bit of touch up in compositing, like treatment to the final render, and that'll be it. But most of it will be an exploration on the shader itself. And it piggybacks a lot off of a chapter in the Shader Forge course. Let me go find that real quick. I did a lesson on gemstones, and it kind of doubled as an ice material. But yeah, this one right here, gemstones and ice introduction. So yeah, we're using some similar techniques in a different application. And yeah, should be fun. So we are starting completely from scratch, meaning I'm going to show you, I'm going to take you through finding photographic reference and where I get that stuff. So let's get right into it. Make sure I'm not missing any questions. I asked a question if anyone was new in here. Let me see. Okay, first time, Joe OJ, welcome. First time. Okay, so if it is your first time, let's see if there's anyone else in here. Newcomer, hello. Kiro Monkey, welcome. Yes, live rendering. I'm glad Jake is excited about that. Oh yeah, the new Stream UI, Aaron. So that I updated that as well. Again, in efforts to legitimize this operation, a little more clean. That was Wes Burke that came up with this, so no more blue bulky borders. Okay, so we have at least a couple new people. So since you're new in here, we have a somewhat basic chat system, but in order to communicate with me and ask a specific question, because I highly encourage questions, this is arguably one of the best ways to communicate with me and anyone else who does a stream, is to ask questions in the chat. And the way you do that is add the word question as a prefix to your question in all caps, and that'll make it a little easier for me to spot it in the chat, because we have a fairly active viewership in here, and so there's a lot of communication happening in the chat. Add that question prefix, and I'll be able to see that right away. But yeah, ask away whenever you're have a question about anything that I'm doing. It's pretty much an open forum in terms of that. So awesome. Let's look at some reference, and specifically finding reference. I have been using a new site. You already know about Pixabay. I'll go to those real quick. So Pixabay.com is a collection of royalty-free public domain images that I've used before in training to gather images, reference images, and even textures. This one, as well as Pexels, Pexels.com. Make sure you guys can see that. Okay. And so this is another site, very similar thing, and they're connected in some way. I think if they're owned by the same company or whatever. Like they are connected somehow, but you can find slightly different images, sometimes the same images. But I found a new one thanks to a comment on YouTube called unsplash.com. And this one, in my opinion, is even like more artistic minded images that are free and open source, free and public domain kind of situation. So it's a great place to find, like if I want to create, for example, icicles, if I want to find like nicely photographed artistic type images to reference, this has become my favorite place to do that. Let's see, question ... Oh, this must be, you're just showing how to do it. Thank you for that, Char. I appreciate it. So yeah, we're looking for icicles from unsplash.com. And I believe, okay, yeah, this is the one that I chose as my favorite reference. So let's open this in a new tab. And yeah, this is what we're shooting for. Kind of a very close-up shot. I like the portrait style rather than the wide format, the widescreen format that I usually do, which is the default in Blender. So we're going to be turning it vertical, focusing on these icicles. So that's what we're going for. And I suppose I'll just leave the tab up and reference it in Chrome rather than opening it in, well, no, I think what I'll do, trying to determine if I should save these images and open them in Blender or just reference them here. Might be cleaner just to reference them in here. So let's take a mental snapshot of what we're going to do. Well, now that I'm saying that, I feel like maybe I should just download it. So let's just go ahead and download it. This will also offer me the opportunity to, yeah, I'll just kind of show you how I create my project file directory and all that good stuff. So I'm going to copy that image, go to edu, live streams, Blender projects, Blender projects, icicles, and we're just going to create a new one called live. All right, so this is going to be the raw project directory, and we're going to add a new folder, not new window, new folder called ref. That's typically what I do. Like for core project folders, it's going to be there's reference, ref, img for images like renders or any other utility images that end up being used, scn for scene. So let's go ahead and add some of these. img, which is where my renders will go, scn, which is where stands for scene. That's going to be my Blender projects. And I don't think I'll need this, but let's go ahead and add a text folder, which would be for textures. So sorry, we were working on an article today about how to organize your scenes, and so I guess that was on my brain of like sharing that with you. But that's kind of my basic setup. And so within ref, I'll go ahead and paste our image that we just downloaded, our key reference image, and jump back over to Blender. All right, so what we're going to do, what I like to do typically when I'm doing rendering, we won't need animation, so I'll get rid of the timeline. By the way, this is a pretty new build of Blender 2.8. I downloaded it yesterday, so it should be, I mean, I don't think any major things happened in the last 24 hours. But someone asked if we're going to be doing specific 2.8 things, and I don't think so. I mean, we're going to be using cycles because Eevee does not play well with my Mac and recording. I mean, live streaming. We've done that. We've learned that the hard way. But so yeah, I don't think it's anything particularly exclusive to 2.8. Just cycles, kind of a typical cycles principled shader setup. So if you're using 2.79, it should be applicable there too, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And since I am doing rendering, I like to make a small window that will serve as a preview for our render scene. It's like it's a smaller, more optimized version of the render. So I'm going to make a new panel down here that's about the size of what the render will be. Switch to the 3D view, and it'll go here once I set all that up. And then I'll make this one an image editor and open that reference image. Let's see here. Icicles, live, ref. There we go. All right, so now I don't have to jump back and forth to the Chrome browser. It's going to just be available here. Make sure I don't have any questions, any unanswered questions. Doesn't look like that. Awesome. And then let's go ahead and set up while I'm thinking about the render. We'll set up, basically reverse this. Instead of 1920 by 1080, let's make it 1080 by 1920. And probably like a 50% render to start off. All right. And then the camera, for some reason it bothers me to have those in there by default, so I always remove those and then simply add any cameras or lights that I need later. And we're ready to start modeling. So based on the reference, you can see that we're going to simply need some long cylinders that taper towards the bottom. It's going to be a very simple shape to create. If you came here to master modeling today, that's not really what we're going to learn. It's going to be super simple. And to think about kind of the structure of this model, I'm going to want the origin, this orange dot in the center, to be at the top of each cylinder so that I can easily scale these icicles and kind of place them at the same level as if they're attached to a branch or a power line, something that the ice has collected on and it's hanging from. So to do that with the default cube, I can simply select all my elements in edit mode, hit hit G, Z, and then -1. And that will place the cube directly in line with the object origin. Now from here, what I'll do is, let's scale this a little bit thinner. Go to wireframe. And bear with me, I am still getting used to 2.8, so some of my traditional, our traditional hotkeys are ingrained in my muscle memory, and I might bumble around slightly. I'm still not super fluid yet. All right, so all I'm doing here is extruding a cylindrical shape, making it a little bit smaller towards the end, kind of looking at my reference because it starts wide at the base. It kind of keeps the same radius, about, 50% to 75% of the length of the icicle, and then it tapers towards the bottom in a kind of droplet, a tiny droplet shape. So I'm just mimicking that right now. Let's extrude one more time in Z, scale out to represent the drop, and then maybe Alt-M to merge at the center. All right, so this should serve well. If we, in object mode, hit Control 3, I'm going to make it a little bit higher resolution if we look at our modifiers. My windows are pretty small right now, but if we look at our modifier tab, what Control 3 did was add a subsurface modifier with a view of 3. So it's 3 levels, only 2 for the render. Let's make that 3. And I thought it's going to be Eevee when it was announced. You're talking about this. Did I say that? Oh, no. Did I say that? I hope not. Yeah, Eevee is obviously the latest and greatest for Blender 2.8. But if you guys remember the car stream where I did lighting in Eevee, it was particularly slow and sluggish. And I think my Mac hardware is just not good for Eevee right now. I need to do more research, but I've done several Eevee projects, and pretty much anything that's more complex than a standard principled BSDF, with like a dielectric or metallic kind of object. I did a project recently with a ton of alpha transparency and several layers of alpha transparency, and it was taking like 30 seconds per frame to render. And there was no lighting, no shading. It was purely emissive, alpha transparent objects in the scene. So I need to dive into Eevee because it seems to have a very thin threshold between like impressively real time and really sluggish. So that's just been my experience, and trying to do streaming and Eevee rendering in real time, I just don't have the hardware. I need to get a new computer to accommodate that. So I apologize if you came in here expecting Eevee. There's really nothing in this kind of project. There's nothing special about Eevee other than it being in real time, which is special. I understand, but I don't know. I've been used to cycles rendering, and the 5 to 10 minute render times haven't bothered me for years. So it's also just cycles is more, comfortable, reliable. Like it's more fully featured. So I tend to default to cycles still. while I'm thinking about it, in this bottom right viewport, I am going to disable overlays because it will eventually only be for rendering. And so back to the icicle model. Up at the top here, I'm going to switch to edge mode, which, by the way, I cannot seem to get used to vert, edge, and faces being mapped to 1, 2, and 3. I really miss Control Tab. But anyway, that's just a small little tidbit. So with these selected, hit Control B. That's going to bevel the top. Whoops. Try that again. I missed clicking this little arrow to open up our options for that tool, and I'm going to crank up the segments to 2. And I'm also going to get rid of the tool bar because I rarely find myself ever clicking on anything in there. So I'm going to just hit T to get rid of that. No way, Eevee rocks. Eevee is great. It is great. I just think it's new and it's not performed as well as reliably as Cycles has for me personally. So I'm still easing into Eevee. So yeah, I'm still easing into it. All right, back to the model here. Very simple. I mean, we might even be done at this point. Like, it is starting to resemble. Maybe make it a little bit thicker up at the top. Go back to vertices. Alt S to scale it out, or to push it out. There we go. I think that looks like an icicle. Simple enough. And then all we're going to do here is kind of duplicate it around, and we're going to make it some slight variations on the icicle, because as we can see in the image, they're not all hanging perfectly straight down. They each have a little bit of character to them, a little bit of individuality, and whether it's the wind or gravity or whatever's causing a different shape, we're going to try and include that within our model. Maybe make this one overall a little bit thicker. Whoops. For some reason, Alt S is acting funny up at the top. I can just scale it in everything except Z. So hit S and then Shift Z. That'll scale in the Y and X axis, but not the Z. All right, slightly different. And then we'll create a smaller one. And I think between these, wow. Maybe keep the bow, I suppose, like keep the angle and we can kind of rotate it around. Again, thinking of variety. Why is that not rotating very much? Okay. All right, so here's our variety of icicles, and now I'm going to duplicate various selections of these and just kind of build out a collection of icicles. Similar to what we see in the reference image, it's going to be several, not in a row, but kind of giving depth to the image. And then we're going to focus our camera on one of them. That'll give us a nice depth of field effect and fill out the appearance that this is a full completed scene. Let me make sure I haven't seen any. Oh, cool. Wes popped in to say Happy New Year. Blender 2019. Oh, Kent doesn't kick me out for interrupting his class. He seems like got the hint because I absolutely would have kicked him out. I talk to Wes all the time. I barely get to talk to you guys. Let's see if I have missed any questions. Doesn't look like it. Cool. All right, yeah, so what I'm trying to do at this point is I'm going to select all three of these, Shift D to duplicate them, and I want to move them. Let me get my bearings on the scene itself. So it looks like, okay, so now I'm looking from front to back. This green line, closest to me is the front of the scene. Further back is the back of the scene. X represents left to right, typically. So I'm going to plan on placing my camera, front to back. Let me go ahead and do that. Add Shift A to add, a camera. Move that straight back in the Y-axis. And then I might need to kind of go ahead and set that up. Might as well. In the In panel, opening that with the In hotkey, go to Lock Camera to View. Let's look at that over here. And Well, I guess I should look at it here since it's only locked to the camera in this viewport. All right, so this is sort of the perspective I want to look at this scene, and this means my duplicates need to line up more front to back than left to right. All right, so now I've got my camera set up, and I can align the icicles more front to back rather than just left to right. All right, so as I do this, you know, scaling them, some fatter, some smaller, that's going to help me set up the overall scene. Again, the variety is going to give an illusion of more of a realism to this. Ooh. G, Shift Z. And definitely try and break. You can see there's some repetition, like on the right side of the camera frame. It's clear that I have a line of icicles that are kind of all the same size, same orientation. Speaking of which, since we do have some curves, some like, you know, curvature to these icicles, might be a good idea to go ahead and rotate several of them randomly. Using, right here, the pivot point, I'm going to change that to individual origins, RZ, and rotate these like 90 degrees. Select some other random ones. Rotate, let's say, 45. And then continuing to frame our cluster of icicles according to our camera in the bottom left, in the bottom right. I also like the idea of having our icicles. Well, if you saw based on the preview here, where was it? Yeah, this one. You can see that they start longer on the left side and they gradually taper to be like smaller in size toward the right, just to add a bit of visual interest rather than keeping it all, you know, the same kind of length. So I'm going to recreate that in Blender as well. So I need to move all of these up for one, or maybe just move my camera down. Another thing about me that you might know from my previous training is I don't like to see anything beyond the camera view. What do you call it? The camera viewer? I forget what it's called, view range or whatever. So right now you can see like a halfway transparency outside of the camera's view. I personally don't like that. I want to go to the camera data, viewport display, and turn alpha all the way up. So now I cannot see any of that. It just messes with me visually. So now that I've fixed that, so to speak, let's kind of take all of these as a group, move them up, and then maybe just scale them in Z. All right, so yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. Which one is this? All right, so I think this icicle will probably be our main icicle. You can see it's kind of in the middle of the frame, also in the middle of the collection. So we'll get nice depth of field up front as well as in back. And then that means I need to duplicate a few more, make these a little longer, maybe like broader as well. I also don't want to forget the small icicles. They're important too. So keeping an eye where that appears in the render frame. Maybe spread some of these out a little bit. So as I'm thinking this through, you know, you might be thinking, well, what is, or we at least have to address the idea of thinking about the scene outside of what we see, because you know, the benefit of creating an image like this, especially when we're trying to make it believable in the realm of photorealism, is we get to exclude a lot of what's in reality. You know, we're not going to use an entire forest outside of this image. You know, we're faking it. So we get to create the icicles by themselves, essentially. We don't have to create the power line that it's hanging on or whatever. But I do want to be mindful of it because, you know, if I just left the icicles hanging here without any kind of object for it to hang off of, you know, like there's probably going to be some issues with the refraction, because if you think in this image, let's say they're hanging off of a tree branch, that tree branch is probably influencing the way the refractions are working. Like there's going to be a dark color presence at the top of the icicle, whereas if we left that out, you know, we would be lacking that part of the puzzle. And so I do want to be mindful of that. And eventually I'm going to add just a simple cylinder to represent that kind of shape. You know, as I'm looking through this, I'm wondering if there's not enough variety in like the curvature of each of these icicles. Like maybe they need to be a little bit more extreme. I don't know. That could be a simple thing to fix later. But maybe it won't take long just to add a little bit of that now. Okay. Cool. All right, I think we've got a nice collection started. Question, is there a rule of thumb when choosing an object for depth of field? A rule of thumb. I wouldn't say I'm the authority. It kind of depends on how you want to frame the image. Now, for a project like this, you know, I tend to lean towards it being in the center. You don't have to do that. Like we could certainly focus on one of the front icicles, but for me, I like the depth that it brings to the final image to have both front, like a foreground depth of field, as well as background depth of field. And so for that reason, I'll need to select an image or an icicle in the middle, like this guy, to represent the focus of the camera, and we'll get depth of field both front and back. Well, while we're talking about that, let's go ahead and set it up in, let's see, I got to select my camera. Remember what object this is visually. Then select the camera, depth of field, and select a focus object, this guy right here. All right, now if we turn on limits, we should see that our camera is focused on that particular icicle. And now I need to switch. Let's see, we can go ahead and do like a test render, I suppose. Switch our engine to cycles. I know that disappointed some of you just now, but I apologize. I'm rolling with cycles. And we are then we need to add a world texture. So that's the next step, I guess. We can get a taste for the depth of field. I mean, we might as well do it now. Yeah, I don't need the world right now. So that might make more contextual sense if I get that when I start creating the transparent material. So let's go back to the camera options. Just setting the focus object does not actually turn on depth of field. I need to change the aperture size. Right now it's at 0 meters. Let's go to 1 meter. Also enable viewport rendering. Yeah, we're hardly going to be able to tell. 1 meter looks okay. What about 2 meters? Okay, that's going to be way too much. 0.5 maybe? I'm thinking 0.5 might be appropriate. But you can see, I mean, well, I don't know how well you can see in the stream, but you can see clear blurring happening on most of the icicles. But then right here in the middle, this guy is like perfectly in focus. So that's kind of what we want. So I hope I answered your question, Nathan, about a general rule of thumb. I can tell you my rule of thumb, you know, that's kind of what I did. Put the object in the center, the central focus of the overall image. It provides a lot of depth. But, you know, that's kind of like a starting place. You know, when you, I think it would be a challenge to myself to start focusing on different objects in the frame to experiment with a more interesting frame. But as a rule of thumb, I think in the center is not a bad rule of thumb. Oh, so Aaron, yeah, you're saying need to do stuff like this more often. Simple but striking. My projects are typically way too ambitious and they take forever. Yes, so that is a great point to bring up because I have not been doing projects like this in a long time, but in the last week I cranked out 3, and they were all very satisfying to me. Like the doodles are satisfying compared to like I want to create a game or I want to create a whole animation, and then like you said, they're too big and you don't end up actually making it happen, and motivation wanes. But like doing quick projects like this in 1 to 2 hours, definitely worth it. Build up the portfolio. You can figure out how fast you can work the system and get effective results much more quickly. So yeah, I totally recommend. That's part of the motivation of showing these is to get more in less time. Definitely hack your way through. No rigged characters involved. Very simple modeling. The hardest part is going to be the shader, putting that together. But yeah, we still get hopefully what you think is like an effective render by the end. Okay, so we've sort of set up depth of field. We've at least got the initial settings established. I think we are ready to now introduce the world environment. Also add a quick transparent material. Maybe while I'm thinking about it, start to set up some scene scene organization, right? So I'm going to take all of my icicles, not my camera. I'm going to hit, is it M? Yeah, create collection. Yeah, move to collection, new collection. What is this called? Icicles. Okay. All right, so we've got now essentially like a folder for our icicles. Camera, I suppose we can leave outside. We don't need collection 1. Is there going to be anything else in the scene? Yeah, there might be a tree branch. We'll add that at some point, but not right now. For the world environment, let's add that. Or, yeah, let's go ahead and add the world. No, not yet. First, I want to add the transparent material to our icicles. So into the, wow, the settings is so small. Oh, none of them are active, that's why. Material, we've got one. Let's call it ice. And hit this down arrow, copy material to selection. Now they all share that material. Use nodes, and which, by the way, I don't know why that we still have to click use nodes, because Blender Render used to be the cause of that, and now it's not there anymore. I'm not sure why that's the case, but principled BSDF, that will work fine in this case. We'll take the color all the way up to 1 in our RGB. I'm going to select each of those fields, type 1. Now this is theoretically white. And our, let's see, specular, I'm going to crank up to 1. Roughness, put at like 0.01. It's very reflective. Ice is very reflective. Also, that roughness, never mind. I was going to say it controls the transmission roughness, but it doesn't. So transmission all the way up to 1. Now they become transparent. You can barely see them in the view anymore. Transmission roughness, let's put that at like, I'm going to leave it at 0 for now. All right, so we've got transparent icicles, but on a gray background, it looks terrible. So we're ready to introduce our world environment. Now, where am I going to get a world? We're going to get it from HDRI Haven because it's free, and that's awesome. So switch back over to my my browser and go to hdrihaven.com. HDRIs. And let's think about, while we're at it, think about the reference and what we see here. Say thanks, thank you. Unsplash, big time, I appreciate it. So what we have in this situation, thinking about the larger picture again, is I think it's safe to place these icicles kind of in a forest. So let's just assume that it's a section of woods and the icicles are kind of hanging from a tree branch, let's say. And what it produces for the background, what it means for the background is that we need to have an image that represents that kind of foresty look. But we're going to blur it big time with the depth of field in Blender. So, you can kind of boil this image down to light shapes and dark shapes super blurred. That's kind of the feel, but it means we need to look for a wooded HDRI. So in other words, this skies right here, this one, or the open field, that's not really what we're looking for. We want something surrounded by trees. So let's try nature here and see if we can find something in the realm. Sorry, so here's an example where we're definitely in a collection of trees. I can't remember the one that I used specifically. Like the reason this one wouldn't work is because it could potentially look like your icicles are hanging in the middle of an open field, and that's just not realistic. Maybe this, no, I mean, I want it to be also kind of wintry. Was it this one? Shady Patch? Let's see. None of these are exactly what I'm looking for in that none of them have like snow on the ground, which not that we're going to be seeing the ground, but still that's sort of, I think it was this one, Cloudy Vondel Park. That sounds familiar. Cloudy, I mean, let me just check. Icicles, image, or was it ref? Where did I put that thing? I might have left it in my downloads folder. Sorry, I'm looking for the environment that I used. That's pathetic. Let's go with the Vondel Park. I feel like that one was the one. I don't know where I... Oh, I do know where I put it. I'm sorry. I put it in data to CG library. Textures, HDRI, CC source, HDRI, CC0, HDRI Haven, date modified. Okay, it was Labyrinth 1K, Alien, this one. Which one was that? This one, finally found it. All right, let's download that guy. I'm just gonna go with 1K, you know, keep it efficient. Since we're gonna be blurring it tremendously, it's not that big of a deal. Don't see snowy HDRIs too often. You know, I am doing HDRI Haven because I know they're really high quality HDRIs and they are free, and I think that's awesome. So I'm, you know, happy to use them in the stream. Elsewhere that I've looked, which I think are less high quality, but there's maybe a broader selection, is openfootage.net, and they do have a few more snowy examples. In my experience, they've had that 360 HDRI panorama. Yeah, so you can see several winter themed. This actually would probably be perfect, any of these. But they're CC BY, you know, so you have to credit the author. Not that I'm against that, but it adds another level of complexity. So we're just going to roll with the Labyrinth one from HDRI Haven. Let's see, I downloaded that, so let's go to, well, we know that it was this one, so I'll just copy it to my textures directory. All right, back to Blender. And I'm in the World tab, World Object Settings, and go to Use Nodes. We want it to be, instead of a simple color, we'll change it to environment texture. Everything goes pink. And now we're ready to select the actual image. Textures, Labyrinth. Okay, now we immediately get more information in our render. But we're quite a ways off from the reference. Now let's, I think it's finally time to step into the shader editor, and specifically the world mode. All right, now we can see the node version of our world setup. There's a couple things I want to do. Number one, I want to, I want to change the color. So let's go to color, mix RGB curves, not mix, just regular RGB curves. And there's a coldness to the reference image here where everything's kind of a gray to blue tint, whereas in our HDRI that we downloaded, it's more green, like earth tones, green to brownish. So we can just modify, you know, any HDRI to feel more blue and cold in this situation. I think crushing the blacks a little bit, brightening the whites. So in the color tab, in the C tab, it's kind of what we're doing. And then in our, let's take the red and just drop it down. That's going to essentially make the green and blue a little more prominent, but maybe raise the blue. It's going to start to feel a little bit colder. Now, even if I don't get all the way there, because you can start to get out of the realm of reality a bit, just remember that you can also adjust, we will also adjust this in the compositor as well. All right, so let's say that I've kind of ballparked the cold feel of the HDRI, made it generally more cold. But the perspective in this 360 HDRI it doesn't match the contrast that we see in our reference, where we have very dark splotches, you know, of tree leaves against a background of sky. Right now we pretty much only see trees. But I think if we hit, I'm using the Node Wrangler add-on, by the way. So if you don't have that enabled, search for Wrangler. Make sure you have that enabled in your settings and add-ons, because that means I can select this image texture, Control T, and that will automatically place a texture coordinate node and a mapping node. Now the mapping node is great because we can start to rotate our HDRI around and maybe find more contrast in this image. That's also going to make the refractions inside of our icicles be a little more playful, a little more detail in there. So as I rotate this thing around, you know, we really are the camera is a little too close to the ground, so we never really see that contrast of bright sky against dark tree leaves. So what we can do is, let's turn off that rotation. We can also rotate it, you know, down like this. So once I rotate the HDRI this way, we do see more of that sky. And then rotating it in Y, you know, I don't want it to look like the world is rotated, but I do want it to feel, I want it to have more contrast. Let's see, something like this, perhaps. And balancing the X and Y out like this, you know, we'll straighten up the crookedness that we had. Trying to find a good spot. Maybe something like this. Try crushing the blacks a little bit more. I don't know. It's kind of bright on top and dark on bottom, whereas this one, the reference doesn't quite have that clear gradient. So maybe rotate this thing around a bit more. Okay, maybe I'm liking this. I think that's going to be good. It's good for demonstration's sake. Didn't really solve the problem I was just talking about, you know, but I got to remember, I'm not trying to match the reference 100%. That can be a rut that I get into, and a lot of digital artists, I think, get into, and they're using references like, it doesn't look exactly like that, so I need to make it look like that. But that's not a problem. It's just reference, it's just inspiration. And I actually think, you know, I kind of like a little bit more rotation. And you probably recognize right now that this is like a tree, a forest that's been rotated, and that looks weird. Especially since the icicles are telling us, you know, it needs to be rotated a certain way. But like, yeah, if I change it to look like this, it's much less noticeable. Like the person who did not see me rotate this HDRI around would not notice that these are trees that have been rotated. They just look like, you know, a branch of a tree coming out in the angled direction. Does that make sense? So it is okay for me to do this. It'll work fine. Like in the reference image, we have no idea of what the shapes of the trees are. It just looks like tree branches intertwined kind of thing. Let me see if I'm missing any other question. From Dragon Ice, what is the difference between copying material to all icicles and make them link with the material? Let me see. Oh, I think I know what you're asking. So right now, all of my objects, they're not linked. They're all individual. And there's not too much of a reason behind that, except that if I want, I do maintain the option to go in and tweak each one individually. And for this type of scene, I might want to do that. Like I might see the render and say, I want this specific icicle to be shaped slightly in another way. Whereas if they were all linked, each change that I made would be propagated all over the place. So whenever you link an object, like if I duplicate this guy and in the options make it linked, now they share the same object data, but also the same material. And I think that's what you're talking about. So that, you know, it kind of does that process automatically where I manually added the same material to all my objects. This process does it automatically because since they're sharing the same object data, they're also sharing the same material because it's mapped. The link is mapped to the data, not the object. So, it kind of neither way provided a tremendous benefit. So it's just, when I'm linking objects, it's for a very intentional purpose. I know, for example, I want all of my screws in this contraption to be exactly the same, and anytime I change one, I want them all to accept that change. Whereas in this situation, I want all my icicles to be more individual, I suppose, is kind of my best explanation for that. Question down here from, let's see, Pavel. Yeah, sorry about that. I kind of got caught in the workflow. Wait. Where is that question? Maybe add some color correction to the HDRI. That's not a bad idea. Let's see. Can't you just link only material? Man, I'm not, what do you mean just link the material? I see what you mean. Right, so the other way to do that is, all right, so what you're talking about, I think, is if none of my materials are sharing a material. Let's say I take this one, whoops, not a new material, take the ice material, then select everything and hit Control L, make links to material. So now that they're all essentially sharing the same material. I don't think that that's any different than just copying material to selected. I don't think. But if anyone does know, please correct me, because I think I'm correct about that. It's kind of the same operation. Let's see, question down here. I'm looking for your question. Is it your question, Pavel, that I'm missing? Because I think I'm just, I answered Dragon Ice. I don't think I've missed anything else, unless you're, Pavel, if you're the one that asked a question, please ask it again. I'm sorry, I can't find it right now. Let's see. So Pavel, you also mentioned doing a color correction node. Now, yeah, let's try that. I'm going to turn this one off and see. I don't usually use the color correction node that often. I feel like there's several color modification options that are different ways to do a similar effect. And so it kind of comes down to preference. Let's do, wait a minute. Maybe you're talking about compositing. Yeah, I think that's what you're talking about. Okay, yeah, I am definitely going to do color correction, like my final color correction in compositing. But right now, it's in the ballpark, I suppose. I could maybe, let me try one thing. Hue saturation. Let me turn the saturation down to like 0.5. That does get it much closer. Actually, yeah, it's definitely a step in the right direction. So here's something else. One thing that I'm kind of noticing as I do this is my brights are always darker than what we see in the reference. And the only reason I can find is that it has to do with Filmic. So this might be a controversial thing to say, but I find myself always turning off Filmic. I just don't like, at first it was me thinking I'm just not used to Filmic. But like in this case, I really want the brights to be brighter, but like they never get brighter. Like they always stay the same. And they don't get to the level of bright, but if I switch to color management and go back to default, like this is more what I want, So like I own that it's possibly ignorance, but when it works, it works. And I like default a little bit better than Filmic personally. I've just found myself turning Filmic off because it looks kind of washed out and not as contrasted as I want. And when contrast nodes don't do that, I don't know, it just makes me scratch my head and go back to this. I don't know if I ticked anybody off with that or if that was as highly controversial as I fear it might be. All right, that's going to be fairly close. That's like breaking one of the Blender commandments or something. Yeah, no, seriously, I have that feeling too. Like it's Filmic or bust. And I mean, I just keep going back to default. No warning, just did it. Let's see, I'm checking to see if I missed any bit of information. All right, I think I'm caught up. But all right, so let's do a render just to get something to start from. I also am curious how long this is going to take per render. So we're also almost to the hour mark. I think we're making okay time. We've got 50% of our 1080 by 1920 resolution. Let's go to our render like samples. I think 128. I don't think we need that. Let's go to 64. And for a still frame like this, it's basically a no-brainer to not use denoising. So I'm going to turn that on in our layers properties. And is there anything else? I don't think so. I think that'll be good for an initial render. So let's see what we have. Also, what do you guys think about the default Blender render window being broken out into its own window? What do you guys think about that? I'm on the fence. It reminds me of Maya and 3ds Max, but I don't know. I guess over the years became partial to the rendering in the existing user interface. Okay, that was actually really fast, 23 seconds. But you can see that we're off to a good start. The icicles are obviously way too smooth. We're going to need to break those up significantly. Whoops. Sorry. I don't like to make my windows spread apart like that, but kind of have to. So yeah, the next step, darn it. The next step is breaking up our icicle procedurally with materials and adding displacement, and also a bunch of fun stuff inside each icicle. But we're off to a good start. We're matching, similar color tones and atmosphere. We've got a nice depth of field happening on the icicles, and yeah, I mean we've got a fast render time now, but it'll probably go up once we start doing funky stuff in the shader editor. Sloppy but more organized. Prefer it much more. Annoys me in 2.7 whenever it uses the wrong window. I can understand that. It has done that for me too. Okay, cool. So it seems like in general that's a preferred thing. Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of you are putting it on your second screen. I do that too, actually. I just can't do that during the stream itself. So, all right. I like where we're off to. It's a good start. Slot number 2, just so we remember that. And we're ready to start building out our material for the icicles. This is where it gets fun. I like to get lost in the shader editor and do all kinds of funny stuff, with nodes. So I look forward to this part. Let's select the icicle, since they're all, I think, sharing the same material. Go back to object mode, and here we go. What is the first thing that I want to do? I think the first part is going to be displacement, and that is to break up the silhouette of each icicle. So if we zoom in here, you can see there's this smooth, like bumpy kind of ridging going on in the icicle. And I assume that that's where the icicle with water dripping down, slowly freezing over time, kind of creates this pseudo water droplet noise pattern. And we're going to create that next. And we're going to do that with displacement. I'm not sure if I want to use, well, first, let's, while I'm thinking, let's go ahead and save a file. Live scene icicles 01. And yeah, now we should be safe in case it crashes. I was contemplating, should we use adaptive subdivision? And I feel like in this version it crashed on me. So I just want to be safe, I suppose. We will at least be using, how else am I going to do that? I think it has to be that way. All right, I'm going to prepare for it then, and hopefully it doesn't crash. But if we go to our engine settings, I think that's what that is, like our render engine settings. I'm going to go to feature set and choose experimental. And then in our subdivision surface, this user interface is now changed, and we have an option to enable adaptive. So I'm going to click that. All right, no crash. That's a good sign. Save the file one more time. Maybe save it as version 2. And yeah, so now that we've got adaptive on, whatever whatever texture we plug into the displacement socket down here, it's going to create enough geometry to accomplish that detail. And the default settings are great for this. So I'm going to add now, we're going to explore the texture to use. Texture, what did I use? I'm trying to remember. I think just a regular noise texture worked well, if I recall. I think I tried a few different ones. If we look at the render by default, let's try one thing. A good practice, if we go back to the 3D view, is to go ahead and apply the scale. Control A, apply scale. And that doesn't actually do anything. So I'll just use the object. I feel like that used to do things in previous versions of Blender, but not anymore. Instead, we'll just hit Control T on this to bring up our texture coordinates. I won't need the mapping. Control X. And let's use our object coordinates instead. This serves the same purpose, essentially. Takes our noise pattern and projects it in a uniform way. It's not skewed out at all. Time to make some noise, boys. That's right. Noise is the bee's knees when it comes to procedural shaders. Shift A. What I want next is a converter color ramp. I'm sure that I'm going to need this to adjust the contrast. I'll leave this out here in case I need to use it anywhere else. All right, let's find a good scale. This is too fine in my opinion. How about 1? That should work decently. Maybe crush the blacks slightly. Detail, I'm going to leave that down. Let's just plug this in, see what's happening. All right, so immediately we do get, you can see that the surface is being significantly changed. So we can go to converter math if we want to dial it back down. Simply a math operation, change it to multiply. Value of 0.5 means that it's half of the impact that it was before. And that looks okay. Let's see, let me plug up our actual material. And so this preview, I need to remember that the preview is not entirely accurate. It's only using 3 levels of subdivision. And since our models were so simple in their geometry, it arguably is not going to match what the real render is going to look like. So let's go ahead and do another real render. Question, is it possible to use micro displacement for the icicles? Yeah, that's what I'm using. Adaptive subdivision is micro displacement. It's just the Blender version of it, I guess, Blender word for it. And that actually looks very similar to our preview. That seems odd. Dicing rate at 1 should be fine. Oh, I know why. So because I'm basically I set up adaptive for only one object. So let me exit that, go back to the 3D view. So for this one icicle back here, that's the one that I turned adaptive on. If I select another icicle, adaptive is turned off. So let's select all my icicles, hold Alt, and click adaptive. There we go. Now, okay, so actually adaptive, I guess, is effective in the viewport. It wasn't at one time, and I'm confused actually. Okay, so maybe the adaptive is used when you're viewport rendering, but in the actual display here, it's only showing 3 levels. Yeah, we can see that now. Okay, problem solved. Let's try a render again. Now that they're all using adaptive. So gens, if you don't see adaptive, it must be because you don't have, in the engine settings, you have to have experimental enabled. So under cycles, you have to have cycles enabled number 1, not Eevee. It doesn't work in Eevee. Another reason we're not using Eevee. And then feature set experimental. Then you should see it pop up on any subsurface modifier. All right, cool. Let's check out that render. Okay, that's looking pretty good, actually. Like, it's a little too strong, but I like where it's headed. So let's, what am I doing? Okay, so I'm analyzing this. What do I want to change? I want to dial down the effect. So it decreased the strength, maybe by half. Let's try it by half. So 0.25. All right, render that. Should also probably change to the next slot. I don't like that there's not a render button. So like in order to render, as far as I know, in order to render from this view, you can't do it. You have to click on the main Blender UI to go to render, and then that makes the other window disappear. Kind of strange. A little quirky. All right, let's take a look at this compared to our reference. Well, it's going to disappear as soon as I click the reference. All right, I mean, it's pretty close. It feels pretty decent. I suppose one thing that seems true, you know, we have these little knobs in here that are clear outliers from the rest of the shape, and we don't really have any of that happening in our version. So perhaps I want to try and add very concentrated bumps, you know, to random icicles. Also, it seems that once we get down to the droplet portion, you know, all the bumps kind of ease up. It's much more concentrated and strong up top. Once we get to the droplet, it starts to disappear. F12. I don't think F12 works on my Mac. Yeah, it just increases my volume. Or F11. No, that's the other. That decreases the volume. But maybe on Windows and Linux, that's how you do that. Well, char misses the F. Nope, no? Okay. On Mac, at least, it doesn't seem to work. Macs. Used to be in love with them. Not so much anymore. For other reasons. And yeah, so okay, so the first element is I think what I see right now, the strength of the displacement is good toward the bottom part of the icicle. Like it seems to match the reference towards the droplet portion. But up top, I actually liked it to be a little bit stronger. So let's control that with a node, with a basically making a factor out of the Z direction. So if I grab a converter, separate X, Y, Z, it can take a vector like generated. And let's look at that by itself, X, Y, and Z. All right, so with Z, you can see that there's black at the droplet and white up top. This is going to be perfect for us to use a color ramp. All right, so I can make the black area be 2.5. Click black and make that value 2.5. I'm sorry, 0.25. And then up top, we'll make this 0.5. All right, so now this is going to control our multiply node and thus our displacement. All right, so towards the droplet, it's a little less impactful, a little less strong of a displacement, and up and above that, it should be stronger. Let's do a render. See that before and after. Slot 4. There is an F12 on Mac, but the system maps it to volume up and not volume down. All right, volume up. F11 is volume down. Function F12, let's try that. Well, where's the function button? There's Control, Alt. Oh, is it Option? Well, real quick, let's take a look at this render. I've been distracted by the render itself. This does look a little bit better. If we go Control or J, Alt J, Alt J, you can see that towards the bottom, the displacement stayed the same, and then it got stronger up top. I like that. Now do we want to add, I think I might try and take a few minutes to add, whoa, look at that. I can scroll in and out, but I cannot middle mouse click. That's good to know. Maybe the outlier knobs, you know, this like extreme punch out. I think we can probably try and add that with a, I mean, we could do it potentially with another noise texture. If we just kind of, what am I trying to say? Exaggerate the effect, so really crush the whites down, then push the blacks up. What I'm trying to do is just get a few black spots to appear. Yeah, sort of like this. Maybe increase the scale to like, maybe decrease the scale to like 0.5. Okay, yeah, this is more what I'm talking about. Just an outlier nub. However, it reveals another problem. So we're applying the exact same material and texture to very similar objects, and we're starting to see a repeating pattern. This is where we can incorporate the random object data to affect our textures more randomly. So if I add a input object info node, and then Shift-Control-Click until we get to the random slot, you can see that each icicle now is a different shade of gray. It's a random shade of gray. And we can use this to, for example, affect the scale of our object, the scale of our noise texture. So let's see. The way I like to do this is plug it into a color mix node. And if we like the scale value of 0.5 down here, let's leave that one alone. That one's fine. But let's change the oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. No, that is the one that we want to change. Yeah, that's the new one. That's this one right here. So if we want the scale factor to be around 0.5, let's make these colors like just slightly off of that value. Like instead of 0.5, let's make it 0.7. And then on the low end, let's make it 0.3. So there's now a spectrum between 0.3 and 0.7 that's randomly determined by this object info node. Plug that into the scale value. And you can see that they did separate a bit. But maybe we can exaggerate it a bit more. How about 1 and 0? So that does actually separate it significantly. And maybe now this can be applied as our nub, and I actually want to invert it. So flip the color ramp, and I want only bright spots like this. Oh, nice. Rita, your work is inspirational. I'm learning lots here. That's awesome. I'm so glad you're learning. That thrills me when you learn, I swear. Blackmagic. Thank you, Miranda, or well, Blender really. Nodes are true Blackmagic. It's why I spend so much time in there. And like, I mean, I kind of joked about it on one of the live streams where I said, of course, it's going to be procedural because texture painting is for the birds, and it's a joke. But like, I mean, I haven't hand painted textures or needed to hand paint textures in a while because so much can be accomplished procedurally with nodes that it's just too much. It's more fun to do it this way, and it's more flexible. It certainly doesn't eliminate the need for hand-painted custom UV textures by any means, but you know, these kind of projects, the time can be shortened to create them whenever it's procedural. So yeah, it's totally Blackmagic. I love it. And did I miss any questions? No, that was the F12 talk. So yeah, I haven't missed anything. Awesome. So I've got the nubs, the centralized focused nubs, I don't know what else to call it, these things right here. I've got them isolated to white spots, and that means I can add them to this other color ramp with a mix RGB, make it an add operation. All right, now we can see them starting to be added. I might just crank it all the way up to 1. All right, so let's see what that looks like on the material. See if we see any isolated nubs. Let's do a render. I am a sucker for also doing befores and afters, so I like to switch to the new slot. These nodes look tricky. That's understandable also. They definitely are. If there's anything I completely need to work on is it's actively organizing my node networks a little bit better. I get into this kind of head space where I just want to create as fast as I can, and I'm just adding nodes, bam, bam, bam. But this kind of thing can be organized better. I mean, it's somewhat organized. I know that I want this texture coordinate. I will probably reuse it several times, so I put it off to the left because I'm going to grab it and plug it in somewhere else. I try and put related nodes close together, but they definitely can be organized more, and it is often a bit of a spaghetti mess. But like what it offers to you is pretty worth it. So they are complex, and that's why we have a lot of material covering node networks and creating materials this way, so that if you do it a lot, you're going to be used to it, and it's not going to be so confusing. Okay, so we did a render, right? Let's go before. All right, so yeah, we did add these little knobs. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I want. You can definitely see that they were added. Yeah, it looks okay. Looks all right. I don't know, something about it's not thrilling, but I'm not sure I want to spend more time on it. I think that looks fine. Okay, so we've adjusted the silhouette of the icicles. It looks in the ballpark of what we see in our reference image. But next, I want to dive into the. If we look at our reference a little bit more closely, something that's important to icicles is that it creates a lot of bubbles inside. Like air gets trapped while the ice is freezing, and it creates this. This very naturalistic type ice. It's not perfectly clear see-through like what our icicles are currently. There's this element of blurry transmission and roughness inside of the icicle. So that's what I want to focus on next. And this is going to be a bit down the rabbit hole. If you're new to shaders, concrescence, this might be even more confusing. But it's pretty powerful what you can do. And that's what we're going to touch next. So I'm going to use this node that we created. It's a node group called I completely blanked on what it's called. I talked about it last week. When it like the depth of the thickness of the object matters. Absorption. So this is based on a formula, a mathematic formula for determining the thickness of an object, and it creates a gradient from the inside, the thickest portion, to the thinnest portion. That probably won't mean anything until we see it. So I have the node on CG Cookie. This is, I believe, available. If it's not freely available, it's available to all citizens. So if you're in here watching, you're a citizen, so you should be able to get it. If you go to Blender 3D Resources okay, so it's free. Utility node groups, I'm looking for this one right here, the absorption node. So we can download this button, download. I've already done that. I think it's in my downloads folder. And so if I go to File, Append, and Downloads, let's see, organized by time, it was utility. Utility node groups version 01. And then inside the blend file, go to node tree, and I'm appending this absorption node. All right, now I can go to Shift-A, add group absorption. All right, so what this will do, if we plug it into, if we plug it straight into our color, and let me actually change that to converter color ramp. And instead of black, let's make it like a more noticeable color, like bright green or something. All right, so what's happening here is the thickest portion of our icicle is going to be a very dark green, the full saturation of this green color. But as we approach the thinner areas, it's going to be white, because that's what we've defined here. And if we exaggerate this effect, you'll see it happening. So in our thinner icicles, you can see that the green disappears entirely. And then if we crank up the green, you can see that it's concentrated in only certain parts of the icicle. So where the green areas right now, I want that to be either control the roughness of our principal BSDF. We can plug that into our transmission roughness, but we can also use it as a factor to blend different shaders like translucent into our glass BSDF. See if I'm missing anything. Hello, Mikal. Yeah, a little bit late, about an hour, 15 minutes late, but you can, of course, catch the recording. I'll put that up within 24 hours. Question, can we add sphere geometry inside the icicles to simulate the bubbles? Yes, you can, and I was going to do that initially, but I did a project similar to that, and it took way too long and slowed my computer down to get. I mean, if you look at the scale of these bubbles, super tiny, little tiny bubbles in here. So to make that realistic, you would need probably hundreds of thousands of little bubbles. And when you have hundreds of thousands of little spheres, it slows down Blender significantly. So if you were to do a version of this project, but you wanted to be like really macro photography-esque, you might want to zoom in so that this is your entire render and you do see all those individual bubbles. If that was the case, it would be worth it to use the particle system to generate your bubbles. For me, I did a project like that recently and it was quite slow. So I opted to not go that route. Instead, I'm zooming out a little bit more, which enables me to, what am I trying to say? It enables me to approximate the effect using this method. And again, I use this same absorption method in that tutorial I pointed out, the chapter in Shader Forge on the gemstones. I use this exact same approach. So if you want to see that in more of a non-live format, then you can go check that out. But with this green, the exaggerated green color, I'm kind of trying to get a section of my icicles that I can plug into, either adjust the roughness. So let's do that. Let's actually stop talking and actually do it. For the roughness value, I might duplicate, just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to Shift, Control, and then D to duplicate this node. And I'm going to change what the roughness value is. Now, if we take our transmission roughness up to like 0.5, you'll see that all of it becomes a kind of blurry glass, like a frosted glass type look. So if we use this absorption information, it will make the inside of the thick parts of our icicle, it will make that rough and keep the thinner portions crystal clear. And to do that, we'll make the white flag 0 actually, because 0 represents transmission roughness clarity. And then we'll take the green flag up to like pretty high, like 0.7. All right, now if we plug that into roughness, we might need to do a render for you to actually see what's going on, because it's going to be a subtle effect. You're not going to really be able to see it in the tiny render window that we have right now. So at this point, we probably need to get comfortable with doing full renders. Let me view my render window and switch to slot number 6. Let's see what that does. And we're only at 35-second render time so far. That's pretty cool. That's not bad. Forget the nodes. I want to try sugar-boiled sweets in real life. It sounds like you're piecing out of the stream and you're going to eat some candy or something. That I wouldn't argue with you. It's not a bad idea. I'm guessing the absorption thing would be good for making trichlomes of plants. Never heard of that before. Let's look it up. What is a trichlome? That is wild. I'm not really sure what's going on here, but let's see. If we look up a honey, let me find a good example of this effect. Okay, here we go. This one's a decent effect. So the absorption in this case, it's one material, it's honey, and where the honey is thickest, like in this pore where it's hitting the ground and collecting, it's a darker amber color. But in the thinner part of the geometry, where the stream is flowing down and gravity is pulling the stream thin, it's a much brighter yellow color. So that's an example of absorption, where you see the thickness of the object directly affecting the color of the transparency. It only happens on transparent objects. So I hope that makes sense as far as why we're doing this. All right, let's see the render before and after. I feel like this effect is not really achieving what I want. So what it's doing here, if you can see, it's perfectly clear in version 1, version 2. Only the thick portions of our icicle have gotten a frosted glass look. So it's a step in the right direction, but it's not actually what I want to happen. I want there to be a stronger effect, and I need to get more happening, because it's not just as simple as increasing the roughness of the transmission. I need to make it look like there's crackles and like brokenness inside. That's the only way I can describe it. If you look at all the broken up refractions, the only way I can think to achieve that is by adding like a normal map for the interior. All right, so that's what we're actually going to approach it. It's not going to be enough to do the transmission roughness, so we'll just eliminate that approach. Instead, I'm going to try and first mix it with a translucent BSDF that has a normal map attached to it. All right. So follow through with me, because it's going to take a little bit of. I'm going to build each component, and so you have to stick with me. It's not going to be quick. Transmission roughness. Let's go back to 0.01. All right. So the translucent BSDF, if we plug that in by itself, it's kind of a poor man's subsurface scattering node, and that's going to work great for what I see in this image. I'm also going to add a new texture, Voronoi texture, and start to create a broken up crackly effect to be used as a normal map. So if we look at just I need to grab our object texture coordinates. Okay, so this Voronoi is going to work great if let's change the scale down to 2. That should be good. Let's plug that into, I need a bump node, vector bump. Use this Voronoi as the height. All right, so now you can see that we have this kind of crackled nature to our geometry, faking that effect. And I'm going to leave the strength really high. Typically, when you use a bump map to represent surface stuff, it's very low. I'm going to keep it very high, and we're going to plug that into our normal value of the translucent BSDF. And make sure that color's all the way up at 1. All right, so now we can see within that we have some broken up aspects. I wonder if I also need to use this for the normal of our regular, principled BSDF. So let's plug that bump here. Okay, yeah. This is, I do need to use it here, but I want it to be not so strong. Let's see. So I'll just duplicate the bump node. Well, I'll go ahead and save the file too. But Shift-Control-D to duplicate it and make the strength much less, like 0.1. Let's plug that into our normal. All right, that's a little bit better. That's more like what we're seeing in our reference. All right, so if we, where's my cut tool? I'm trying to cut this connection. Control, click. Whoa, what is that? Does anyone know what happened to the cut tool? Where you could cut connections? Node. I don't know what happened to that. Maybe just pull it out. We used to be able to like knife tool that thing. Maybe hold K. Shift K. I don't know. It looks like I missed a question from Mona Loren. Can we also use displacement maps for the cracks inside? That is a little bit more tricky, because to do the cracks inside, you would have to. You're kind of getting into the real structure of like ice, and I think what those cracks are like little fractures that are like kind of breaking up the interior. So I mean, you'd have to sort of fracture your 3D geometry and then add your displacement to the interior faces. So that gets a little bit weird. It's possible, I suppose, but not practical. What I'm trying to do is just use simple geometry and then achieve this effect with materials, and that way you cannot make the displacement affect the interior of the geometry, only the exterior. What was that doing? So the what's going on here? I kind of forgot what I was doing. This doesn't look right. What are these little specks? Sorry, I just got confused for a second. Transmission 0.001. Like, what are these black specks happening in here? I don't know. Oh well, so we're going to use this bump. That's breaking up the interior of our object a little bit better. At least it appears, it's actually breaking up the exterior, but it appears to be breaking up the interior, and we're going to use that to our advantage. But then we want to mix in this translucent BSDF using our absorption factor. All right, so let's get rid of the green, and we'll go back to black, and now add a color or a shader, mixed shader node. And think about this, on the inside we want to use the translucent BSDF, and on the outside we'll use the principled. So black goes up top, white goes on the bottom, our second input, and then we can use this color ramp as a factor. Now let's this could get tricky because it's going to be a subtle effect. Oh wait, that's not even plugged in. It's going to be real subtle. Almost nothing happening when you're not plugging in the right node. All right, let's do a render of this and see what the difference is. Slot 5, let's go to slot 6. We'll replace, this was just the roughness render, so we'll replace that one, because we are not using that method anymore. Cut didn't work for me lately in 2.8 as well. That's a bummer. This is already more complex than any shader I've ever done. It's a rabbit hole. It's a good, fun rabbit hole. Man, you can do so much with it though. I've tried 2.8, but it's annoying when it crashes because of simple things like disconnect, then reconnect some nodes. I agree. I mean, we're in beta, so like I'm kind of taking it on good faith with the Blender Foundation, with the developers, that like this is a beta version of the software, so it's not alpha. It should be pretty reliable at this point, you know, just bugs being fixed. So I have gotten less crashes since the beta, but still, you know, in the beta they're like adding new things, and I understand if you're weary of even the beta, so I don't blame you for that. All right, I mean, we're looking pretty close to our reference. You know, you don't see the breakup quite as much as I want. I wonder if it'll help if I, you know, like what I'm talking about is this mixture. Well, sorry, let me go back to that render and see before and after. Alt J. So what you can see is that some of our icicles got a lot more of that translucent BSDF. Okay, you can see it actually looks, maybe I like the previous version a little bit better. So maybe we should dial this down so that if there's more white, there's going to be more principled BSDF. And even though now that I'm doing it real time and we only have 30 minutes left, while I did use this extensively and really tweak this to be perfect in the rehearsal of this project, maybe now that we're kind of in it, like I feel like I'm close enough to where it's not going to be worth it to really tweak these fine examples, because we still have to do, you know, some compositing and a final render. So I don't know, I might be okay with this version and not like super tweaking it, because I mean, you can get crazy with using the absorption, and I like to do that typically, but I don't know, maybe what I'll do is duplicate this and give it a different Voronoi texture. So like make this Voronoi a little bit like finer. So let me just show you. So this is Voronoi 1, and we'll plug that into our translucent BSDF, and then Voronoi 2 is just a little bit bigger. That color is still white, right? Okay. There, let's see. There is maybe one more thing. Trying to think. No, I think I'm going to leave it. I'm going to let this be okay. There's not quite as much breakup as I want to see. I mean, we could also make this a little bit stronger. Maybe take a look at that, see what that did. Slot 6, we'll replace that. Or, well, let's make a new one. And we're not even up to a minute render time. That's impressive, man. Cycles still has it. You know, it's not real time, but it's not 5 minutes. So like, I don't know. Cycles is not bad. I think they will fix everything before beta 2. I think you're dead on. I would bet money that there's going to be a beta 2. I'm curious when that's going to happen. Last I heard was like March or April, the official 2.8 release would happen, but I don't know that I believe that anymore. Yeah, I think this is going to be good enough. There's still a few more things to do in the next 30 minutes to call this finished. I'm not going to worry about tweaking the interior, but this is essentially the effect. You know, it looks like there's variety happening inside of the icicle, and that's clearly what it looks like in our reference photograph. And before we added this, it was just very crystal clear, which did not look realistic. So I think we've achieved and approximated the effect. Miranda's 5 minutes on your PC, but 15 on mine. I mean, I don't know. Like this computer was great in 2013 when it came out, but I don't know. I don't know if it's still considered that powerful. But they mentioned that Brecht was able to speed up cycles by some 30% in 2.8. I did not know that. That's brilliant. Man, go Brecht. That's awesome. So yeah, Cycles is still getting the attention from devs, which I like. What was I doing? All right, so let's call the icicles done. Now we just need to finalize the scene, do a final render, add some compositing, do some treatment to call it finished. But we're not far from the finish line here. So let's go to slot 8. The only other thing I want to do, I mentioned it earlier, but if we go to the 3D view, a realistic structural element of this scene would be the object that the icicles are hanging from. Even though we're not going to see it in frame necessarily, we might catch a little bit of it, but the icicles are just hanging out in space, and so there's no kind of object to occlude light or to represent the thing that it's hanging from. These icicles are hanging from. So I want to add that. I'm just going to duplicate an icicle because that will function fine as a tree branch. You know, it happens to be a very similar shape. I'm just going to, let's see. Oh, I must have, let me do that again. Shift D. I don't want it to be linked, so I'm going to uncheck that. Let's maybe pause the render. I don't usually like to keep the Cycles viewport rendering happening while I'm like modeling and adjusting objects. I feel like that is asking for a crash. So let's jump into edit mode and scale Alt-S to push all of our, we need to be in median point, Alt-S to push all of our verts out. What is happening up here? Something weird did happen. Oh, that's going on all of our objects. Funky. I don't know what happened to make that a reality. Let's just X, delete edge loops. Figures on a very simple model, I happen to do a a mistake. Control B. That's what it should be. Oh well. Alt S to push that all out. All right, so now this will function great as a tree branch. We can just kind of position it, scale it up. All right, this is going to represent our massive tree branch. I mean, it just seems massive since we've been focused on tiny icicles. And this is going to use a very simple shader. We don't need to add any complexity to the render. We just want it to be a principled, well, not even principled. Let's even simplify it more than that. Let's change it to a diffuse BSDF and make it a dark color. All right, so if we move that into the camera's view, oh wait, we paused it. All right, you can see that this is kind of our tree branch object. We're gonna move it basically out of view. It might be okay if it's just peeking in slightly, but I want the icicles to kind of intersect with it. All right, something like that. And since it's going to be blurred out heavily, it doesn't really matter that it's in the scene. You know, maybe we can brighten it up a little bit. I don't want it to be an overly dark splotch. But by adding this in the scene, our refractions are going to be a little bit more believable, because in real life, these icicles would be hanging from something presumably dark in color, like a tree branch. So that is going to add just a little bit more realism. If we do a render and do comparison, we should see a noticeable difference. Yeah, it is a funny shape. Obviously, I didn't take time to make it look like a true tree branch, but I mean, hey, we're trying to make this project happen quickly, and cutting corners like this is important. You know, not cutting the corner of eliminating the tree branch and not getting that much more closer to realism, but not spending any more time modeling details that won't be seen. And yeah, we're coming close to the end. I don't think the composition will take too much time. I see it as a microphone that froze over. Hey, yeah, why not? Why not? I'm sure that's happened somewhere in the world. You go to, you know, play a show in Canada or something during the winter and leave your mic outside. I'm sure that's happened. All right, cool. So that little black splotch, let's see before. All right, so we definitely see darkening in the base of our icicles, which is good because I think that represents, or it fights the notion that these icicles are just hanging out in space, nothing attached to nothing. We also see a little bit of a black splotch that is fine with me because it represents the tree branches. And I think we're one step closer to realism. The only thing I'm wondering is if I shouldn't make the tree branch kind of blue to match the rest of the cold tone. I might actually do that. Instead of brown, we'll just break a little bit of convention and go with a blue, perhaps. Since we're so close to the final image, it's okay to tweak some of this stuff to be more realistic in the final image, rather than, obviously tree branches aren't blue in reality. Thick branch. Radical real-time render. Oh, you're singing here, Aaron. I like it. If you guys can't see, we got some musical notes. The render time, the real-time offline render visualization is inspiring song creation, apparently. Oh, that's too blue. I don't like that. I think that's too blue. Let's go to desaturate a bit. 0.3, let's go to 0.1. All right, now let's render that. I need to do it anyway because this might be considered our final render, and I can plug that into the compositor, and we can start getting to work over there. Let's see, while this is happening, I'll jump over and just to do something in this time. If you guys are not aware, not school, whoops. In the events coming up, if you haven't looked at those already. Again, continuing with the winter projects theme, we've got a winter lakescape, which looks like this. So, you know, in the same 2-hour time span, we're going to be creating this entire scene from scratch. There's some cool tricks, I think, in that one that I really wanted it to look like a photograph, but that's hard to achieve, especially with an entire forest. It's kind of hard to achieve in a short amount of time, but came up with something that should be interesting, I think. And then just kind of a nod to polygon modeling. We're going to be spending time modeling the sled on February 5th, and then on February 12th, we'll actually create some, as you could guess, procedural materials to fully realize the sled and give it some color. And then between that, we have a little bit of time, I think one more slot in there before we have a live art Blender critique. So if you're interested in having any of your Blender projects critiqued live and get that feedback from me and Jonathan Lampel, go to the community forum, and right here, February 26th, Blender Live Critiques. This is where this is reserved for citizen members, which all of you should be, who are watching this live at least. You can submit any Blender project, animation, rigging, I guess if you have it, or modeling and material creation, renders, stuff like that. We're going to go through those, submit them here in the thread, and we'll go through them and critique them on February 26th. So yeah, just in case you're not aware of that. Let's go back to the render should be done by now. All right, yeah, so you can still tell it's blue, but not quite so blue. It matches more the tone of the overall image. And from here, we're ready to add a little bit of compositing treatment, and we'll call this thing done. Oh, I don't have any more slots. Bummer. Let's. I guess we'll go back to slot 7, maybe slot 1, because that was the least finished. So yeah, we've come a bit of a ways from slot 1 to slot 8. Pretty cool. All right, back to slot 1, and let's jump into the compositor, which is now broken out into its own editor type. It's no longer part of the quote node editor, which is shader editor versus compositing. Let's just go to compositing, use nodes. There we have our render. Backdrop, sure, why not? And in order to see the backdrop, you have to use a viewer node. So what I like to do is hold shift and drag, now it's right click, shift right click to drag out a reroute node, and then add a output viewer node. Shift control click on that reroute node so we can see it in our compositor now. So yeah, that could be confusing if you're new to the compositor. You have to have a viewer node in order to have a backdrop. All right, so this is going to be kind of a standard, what I think of as a standard photorealistic / believable / artistic treatment. Kind of like an Instagram filter, but not getting carried away, side of the render. I want this to look nice and finished, which incorporates a vignette, a little bit of chromatic aberration, known as dispersion in the node world, in the Blender node world, and a little bit of noise, like some camera film grain. All right, so those are the main components, a little bit of color correction perhaps, though we actually are looking pretty close to the reference, but let's start with a matte ellipse mask. I'll use an ellipse this time around. And we'll put that on the bottom because that's going to be on top of this render layers. And so if we look at that, shift control click on that. Node Wrangler works in here as well. And we're going to widen our ellipse, something like this, and add a filter blur node. Fast Gaussian. I'm going to make the X and Y value at 100. That's just kind of typically where I start off. And then on the size, that's sort of like a multiplier. So if you go up to 2, I think it's like blurring at 200. Wait a minute. Size of 2. Yeah, it just blurs it more. So this presents a nice vignette that we can, it's just a common photographic technique to focus the image or your attention to the center of the image. And color mix. Let's see what that looks like as, let's try I usually like to start with an overlay. All right, so turn it on and off. What is going on? There we go. So with it off and then on, you can see a pretty distinct darkening around the edges, very bright in the middle. We don't need it to be that strong. How about 0.5? Try off and on again. So it's a subtle effect. I think a good vignette is one that you don't notice outright. But like right now, I can't really look at the edges and be like, this is definitely darker. But it feels darker. And turning it on and off, you can see that there is a substantial difference. But you know, some people use a vignette and it's like completely black on the edges, something like this. Yeah, something like this. And that to me is not a successful vignette. It's a little bit too strong. It's way too strong. Let's go back to overlay and then 0.5. Now, what I like about overlay rather than multiply is multiply just turns the edges to black. And I want the overlay actually takes the existing color underneath it and kind of darkens and saturates it a little bit. So I like that it feels more connected into the existing image. Wait a minute, this is not the right render, is it? Why is it using, is it because, does it use the slot? Whoa, did anyone else know that? I 100% did not know that. So I did not know that the compositor uses the active render slot. That's wild. Let me make sense, but that's pretty cool. All right, so this is the actual render. Let's see, on and off. Very nice. Let's see, now maybe add a converter, no, color. I still like RGB curves. I know that that Pavel mentioned color balance. What I still like to do the same kind of thing with a color curves node. Increase the blue and green. What in the world is that little thing? That's really bothering me. Also might, I don't know, I could just, this might not even be needed right now. It does look really close over here. I might just be doing overkill at this point. Maybe I don't need to color correct. Let me just turn that off for now. I'm gonna eliminate it. Control X. I don't think it's needed. I actually like the color. I rarely achieve the right color in the viewport, like in my raw render. I usually just get close and then fully expect to adjust it in the compositor, but I'm actually pretty close. So I think I'll leave it actually. And then, so the next couple steps is add a distort lens distortion node and dispersion up to 0.01. Or is it 0.1? Okay, it's 0.01 or 2. Whoops. Well, okay, so now that I've exaggerated the effect so much, this is another bit of a controversial technique, adding chromatic aberration. It's been a long debated, I think, artistic step in computer graphics. But in an actual camera, this happens to where around the edges of the image, the lens in the camera separates the red, green, and blue channels and creates a rainbow effect just on the outside edges. And so that's considered a problem, a what do you call it? An error? No, an imperfection. That's the word. It's an imperfection in camera lenses, but it's still kind of just physics, and we have never been able to fully eliminate chromatic aberration physically. And so for computer graphics, you know, we want to incorporate that if we want it to look more photographic. Nowhere near this strong, like something like 0.02. And if we kind of zoom into the image a little bit, Alt V, and turn that on and off, you can see that it's a pretty subtle effect, but it looks much more photographic. It's almost, chromatic aberration should be subtle, but it should also be like effective. Okay, so that's kind of the balance I think I'm striking here by just adding a very little bit of dispersion, and now it's much more photographic. It just has, it's just part of photographs. That's not part of renders. So let me reset my backdrop. Yeah, so it is something, Aaron, you're saying you always use it. If I'm going for photorealism, believability, I'm using it myself too. It just becomes standard. But, I mean, camera people are like, why would you put an imperfection into your render? And it's like, well, because the imperfection exists, and I want you to believe this is not a render. So that's why I'm doing it. But okay, after that, the only element that's left, okay, the timing should be good on this, is some film grain. Also another arguably imperfection in camera technology, though I think a lot of times film grain is in really high-end cameras is almost non-existent. But we're going to add a little bit color, texture, no, rather input, and I'm looking for a texture input right here. All right, so this is interesting because it's looking for a texture, not an image or anything, but an actual procedural texture node. And to create that, we're going to jump to the texture tab. Now, I think this is a little bit unintuitive, but this is how it works. So whenever you don't, like, I'm not plugging this texture into anything, even though it seems like I should be plugging it into a node, the option for what type of texture we're creating is by default going into the brush texture, which I think is strange, but that's just, don't be confused by that. I'm going to hit new texture and we'll call this film grain. And the type is going to be clouds, not noise, but clouds is what I like to use. And then the color, I'm going to change that to color, not just grayscale. So this is what we're looking at. Now, if we plug that into our composition with well, let's just look at it by itself. Oh, we need to select the texture, sorry, film grain. And we look at the color. Now, if we plug that into, why is it stretched? Maybe I need to make the scale of X like 0.5. Okay, that looks a little bit more natural. And then color mix. We'll plug that in after the distortion, the lens distortion. Let's look at that mixture as another overlay. All right, so right now it looks really bad, but if we scale this down significantly, size, let's take it down to like 0.01. All right, we're getting closer to film grain. It still needs to go down to like 0.001. Now we're in film grain territory. All right, we just need to adjust the factor to like 0.3. I want this to be pretty subtle. All right, but we are in the realm of camera quality. All right, so what this does for the render is, coming out of the computer, it's very, very clear. It's like crystal clear as long as we don't have any render noise. But then adding this layer of film grain just makes it feel like a photograph. So let's look at the final result. Or what I think is probably the final result. So let's go before, this was like before the tree branch. And yeah, I think this qualifies as being finished. And that's great. Have 6 minutes to spare within this 2-hour time frame. Oh, Jake, I just checked it. Use Control plus right click to knife cut the noodles in the node editor. Control plus right click. All right, so I do use left click select, and I'm holding Control, right click, and dragging. I'm getting nothing. What is that? What about Control left click? Still nothing. Yeah, for me it's not working. I'm not sure what the deal is, but I don't know. Maybe it's a bug, or maybe I'm just something's weird about a Mac. But man, but Omar's saying Blender needs to not make things so confusing. Omar, what specifically are you talking about being confusing? Because I mean, I don't discredit the idea that a lot of this is confusing. I'm just really used to it, I guess. But I'm curious specifically what you meant. Anything else? Any other questions I missed? Oh, save. Yeah, let's save. Let's see. Don't you need to tick fit on lens distortion? Ugh. You are kidding me. Aaron, I have never known that was there. Oh my goodness. So what okay, let's talk about what the problem is initially. So if you see that around the border, using lens distortion, the dispersion by itself, it creates a pretty noticeable, if we zoom way in, a pretty noticeable colored line that all around the border of the image, you can see it really strong here, that does not occur in the camera. And if you click fit, it gets rid of that. I never knew fit was there. And so what I would do when it was really noticeable is I would manually add a distort transform node right here and increase the scale by like 1.1, 1.01 maybe. That is funny. That's what I used to do to get rid of that. But yeah, fit. I learned something today. Pretty cool. I swear you did it in your fundamentals. Man, I wouldn't argue that. I've gone back to look at my own tutorials because I forgot something that I did, or I forgot completely how to do something that I even taught a tutorial about. Blender is just such a vast program. Computer graphics is such a vast field to be interested in. I think it's impossible to really retain everything you know about it or everything you've learned about it right up front. Might even make the vignette a little less strong. There we go. That's more like it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the project. All I have to do now is save the image, which if we go to the final render, image save as, we'll treat it as a JPEG. Whoa. As a JPEG. I mean, PNG I think is a little higher quality. Let's go with PNG. Why not? The defaults of 8-bit color depth, 15% compression is going to be fine. Image, icicles, render, 01. I usually add numbers because it's very common for me to rehash the render, try again, and like get multiple versions. So that's how you save the image. It's ready to post to Twitter or ArtStation or something like that if you want. And that completely finishes the project. If you have any last minute questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll kind of end the stream here pretty soon. Let's see, Jake. You're using today's build, and it's on left-click select, and I control right-click to slash the noodles. You know what was really weird? I'm gonna show you this. I'm going to open up the previous 2.8 build that I had back from December and bring it over here. So this is, I don't know, it was from December. This is an older version. But if we go to the node editor, let me just add a material, or I think there's already one on here. Use nodes. So in here, control left click did not, or control right click did nothing. What is that? Control right click does, I don't know what that does. But it was doing some things. I have my, let's see. We are getting some errors in here. BGL has no attribute, GL color. Something is happening with the Node Wrangler perhaps. But it only worked, the knife tool only worked whenever you would, yeah, here it is. So control left click, you get a box select thing. Control left click and drag by starting inside of a node. Okay, so I've got my mouse inside of a node here, control left click, and the knife tool comes out. So that's what was happening in the previous version. You had to be like hovering over a node, whereas doing the same thing outside of the node would do that. I don't know what that was about, but that functionality seems completely gone in this one. Yeah, same thing, control left click drag, control left click is completely gone. I don't know what that's about, but anyway, I'm sure it'll be worked out by the end. How about making icicles melt? Suggestion from Rita. Yeah, like in an animation, this would be kind of a fun animation. When you say that, I immediately think of like a slow camera move through the icicles, very, very slow macro shot, and then you just see little drips kind of dropping. That'd be a cool way to turn this still image into a short, very short rendered animation. I kind of like that idea. That's definitely cool. Concrescence, isn't Twitter mostly text? I could be out of the loop here, but I use Twitter's my most active social media, and I post just text sometimes, but I post a lot of images too, like renders and stuff. So Instagram is probably the better place to do that, and I would probably get maybe a little bit more traction maybe if I posted there. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should get into Instagram. Off topic, but do you guys think Twitter is a good idea to show? Oh, that's what you're talking about. Yeah. Maybe it's not. Maybe Twitter's not the best place. I mean, I get a decent amount of like people seeing my work, but maybe not as many as could be seeing it. Okay, so the last thing I did want to ask, since I have a week open in, let me see here, community events. I have a week open in February, maybe 2 weeks. That would be the 19th. No, okay. I have 1 week open in February, and I would like to maybe do another project like this. So if anyone has a suggestion, something wintry, like whether it's a cup of hot cocoa or something wintry that I could create a project out of, and if you're interested, I'm open to suggestions if you want to throw them in the chat. Everybody now go follow account on Instagram. I don't have an Instagram account, but I would, if I had one, I would let you know what it was. Okay, so I should definitely create an Instagram, I suppose. Now I'll have 2 social media places to check every morning. Yeah, but if you've got suggestions of winter projects, similar to this, we've done icicles. We're going to do a winter lakescape. We're going to do the snow sled. So if you have any ideas that would fit this format, would a snowman be too complex? Definitely not. A snowman wouldn't be too complex. It's a little bit of a, I feel like a snowman's a little bit of a kind of stereotypical Blender project, like to represent winter. I know that I've done that in some introductory streams before, and so I wouldn't. I mean, I could do that, but I feel like it's been done a million times. A campfire with a snowman, an ice castle. That's pretty interesting. Can we make ice bees that make honey snowman? Comment snowman. I mean, it seems, well, if snowman is that popular, I guess we could, maybe I'll revisit it. The ice castle, that's got my #1 vote right now. Some sort of ice castle. Let's look up, what does an ice castle look like? Is it different than what I think in my head? Holy smokes. How cool would this be? That's not really an ice castle, I guess. Is it? It looks more naturalistic. Golly, that's so cool looking. What is this place? In Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Wow, this is really cool. Not what I was expecting, honestly. Yeah, I was expecting some sort of, almost like a snow castle, but a sand castle, rather, but made of ice. Ooh, Wilco had an idea? Oh, an ice castle. He's the one with, yeah, that is a good idea. I will say, though, what I'm seeing here, off the top of my head, like how to create this kind of effect is using translucency, so subsurface scattering. And I tested 2 icicle scenes in preparation for this. I tested a scene that looked like this, like more of a waterfall that has frozen and you're kind of beneath the waterfall. And render times were crazy, right? So it was like 20-minute render times from the very beginning. So that's why I opted for a different icicle scene. And I might not be able to do that simply because of render time, something like this ice castle situation. But if we, because like naturalistic ice is not so clear, it's not, there's not a lot of clarity. It's very translucent. And that's really heavy on render time. But if we did something a little more like a castle made of ice blocks. Like that might be something I can come up with. Frozen Space Marine helmet. That's an interesting idea. Kind of taking another asset and making it look cold. It's not a bad idea. An ice waterfall. Well, yeah, that's exactly what I tried. And it can be done, but the render times are really, really high. So not really practical for a stream. You were thinking more of a frozen ice castle. Like, yeah, so this is kind of what I thought you meant. You know, something like an actual castle structure made out of... Oh, this looks like more what I'm talking about. Almost like an ice hotel or something. An ice sculpture of some kind? That's not a bad idea. Well, that's actually... That could be good because so far, you know, today was like heavy emphasis on shading and lighting. Next week, or the next project, next week is going to be modeling as the emphasis. And then maybe for the next project, like sculpting, you know, basically taking a sculpture and then turning it, making it look like ice sculpture. So yeah, I mean, we could kind of do anything in an ice sculpture. What would be sort of cool, in my opinion, is making it look like constructed out of ice. So you can see in this like reindeer, the artist took multiple blocks of ice, stacked them on top of each other, and then sculpted from that. So you kind of see the sculpture broken down in the middle, like you can see that seam. That's kind of a cool effect to recreate. But yeah, I mean, we could put some cool lights in the around the sculpture. That would be pretty neat. A polar bear. Project idea, a mug of hot cocoa with dynamic steam and floating marshmallows. I mean, that was one of my ideas too. Not so much dynamic because you start bringing dynamics into a live format and I feel like it's a recipe for potential disaster. Yeah, like the movie Frozen. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm with you. As far as the ice castle thing, I'm kind of leaning towards the sculpture right now because I think we can have a lot of fun with lighting and the transparency of the ice. So it might need to be like a double, maybe not. I wonder if I could sculpt the thing in an hour, probably, and then render it the next hour, shade it and light it in the next hour. That seems doable. I'm kind of leaning towards a ice sculpture. Man, you can do a lot of cool stuff. I love this kind of effect. That's neat. An exploding ice castle, yeah. That would be cool. Probably extend outside the 2-hour time frame. An interior of a log cabin looking outside of frosted glass, not bad. I think that I would immediately think that's a little outside of scope to create a believable log cabin. Another idea, what if we kind of do an ice sculpture, but we go away from photorealism. You know, like what if we find, I saw a material recently, like stylized ice. You know, like something you'd see in a Blizzard game, something like that. I thought I saw material somewhere in here that was very stylized. But basically, we do a structure. I'm into this idea. Rather than always go photorealism, maybe do a kind of very stylized type of ice and lighting. Anyway, I don't know. I'll think about it. These are good ideas. Thank you for helping me brainstorm. Let's do a Yeti with nice fur. Characters they never take 2 hours. Character stuff. So I kind of have to steer clear of characters, I'm afraid. But, okay, it sounds like you like the... Okay, Miranda's, yes, stylized ice. Maybe a fantasy creature sculpt. Okay, so like fantasy creature sculpt and then combine that with the winter theme. I'll look through this stuff. Ice skates, that's another good one, actually. That ice skates is a great example, kind of like the winter sled, of a project that could be done in a short amount of time. Ice skates on like a frozen lake. That's a great example of a doodle, a quote unquote doodle. But I vote for stylized ice. That's kind of where I'm leaning to. Imagine something like this, but instead of realistic ice. It's more stylized. That's what I'm kind of leaning towards. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys for watching. That's going to conclude today's stream. Maybe end on the final render itself. So yeah, that's kind of what we got today. Had a lot of fun with this. Try doodles of your own. Try to limit yourself to a fixed amount of time where you start from nothing and end with something that you can post on Instagram, because we learned today that Twitter is not where you post images. So thank you guys. I will see you next week for the winter sled modeling. And yeah, that's going to be it. Again, you can catch this recorded if you haven't seen it live. Well, it's kind of redundant, but I'm going to upload the recording in 24 hours or so. And that's going to be all. So thank you guys. Have a good rest of your day.